In this movie, we're going to take our walkie-talkie file and we're going to bring it into KeyShot and we're going to start to apply our materials to it and edit some materials as well. If you'd like to follow along, if you go into Chapter 10 sample files, and in Rhino we'll open up the walkie-talkie render start file. So we have the file we've been working on. Notice we have all of our body parts onto separate layers, and remember we did put these side cuts onto their own layer. Now by doing that, we can either give them the same material as we have for the rest of the body, or we can customize how the material is on these particular parts. Now we are going to use the KeyShot plugin to bring the data over, but before I do that, I do want to take this Face Bez G3 layer that is currently switched off, and I'm going to switch it on. And if I zoom in here, you can see we've got this strange kind of overlap of layers, and that's fine. We're going to deal with that once we get into KeyShot. So we do need both those layers switched on so that we're able to look at our two different design options fully rendered out within KeyShot. So now we have the layers we want to import all set up, and then I just simply go up to my KeyShot plugin, choose KeyShot, and then select Render. And there we go, our file is all brought into KeyShot. So the first thing I want to do is I do want to go under my Edit menu, and I want to click on Set Model Units. And I just want to double check that the units are shown are the same units that I created the model in. And this becomes important when we're adding some of the texture materials. KeyShot has a full library of some texture files from manufacturing companies, and as long as your model units are set to the correct size and they were modeled at the same size within whatever 3D program you're using, then when you apply these textured materials, they'll render and look correct. So this does say millimeters, so we're okay with that. I'm going to click my space bar to get my project settings, and when I go to the setting tabs, you'll notice Advanced is not open. I'll click on that and open this up. So right now my ray bounces are set to 6. That's probably fine for this kind of model. If you do have a model that has a lot of transparency or a ton of reflection in it, you may want to set those a little bit higher. And our shadow quality is currently set to 1, and the shadows look pretty good, so I'm going to leave that alone. I am going to check this checkbox for my global illumination. Now, if you're doing a file that doesn't have any transparencies in, you may not need to check that. It's just sort of a workflow I've just gotten into. I always just check it, that way I know it's on. It's just kind of how I like to work. Now, the camera by default does start with a 35mm lens, and that's really kind of a little fish-eyed. So I typically set that to about 45 or 50, depending on the size of whatever I'm working on. And then if I go to our scene, this is the name of our Rhino file. And if I click this little plus sign, move this down, you'll notice right away that these are all of our layer names that we have within Rhino. So it maintains all of our layer names, and all of the parts are on the model. If I switch this off, I can individually turn them on, and you'll see all of our parts are exactly the way we have them set up in layers within Rhino. And I can click that checkbox to switch everything off, and if I click it again, it'll pull everything back on. So in order to set things up and start going, all we need to do is hit the letter M, and by hitting the letter M, that brings up our material library. So we have our whole list of materials, and they're grouped in different folders depending on what type of the material they are. Now your materials are going to look a little different than mine. I've got a whole lot of custom libraries in here that I use for product renderings that I do. We're just going to use the ones that come with KeyShot to set up all of our renderings here. So the first one I'll click on is I'll go into plastics, and I'll click on hard plastics, and we have rough and shiny plastics within here. I think with this, we'll probably set this up, at least at first, with just some rough plastics to give us kind of that textured plastic look. But one thing I do want to do, I still have this sort of overlap material look going on, so I'm going to switch that off. And notice that cleans up immediately. And notice also if I switch off G1 and bring back G3, even though it's rendered in black, it's a little hard to see, they do just swap out, so I can show different iterations of the design very easily here. So as I said, let's just start applying some materials and then we'll go in and tweak them. I'm just going to apply the material. I like this hard, rough plastic, and I can either drag it directly to the model, I can drag it to the name of the layer in our scene tree, and once I let go, it's applied. And I'll just apply these to a few different things. As I said, we're going to come back and we will adjust this. Remember, I have a battery door back here, so I want to throw that on the battery door as well. Now for the side cuts, let me go to shiny, and we'll just throw, at least for now, the shiny material onto our side cuts. Now it doesn't look a whole lot different. But once we start editing the lights in an upcoming movie, you'll really see a big difference on something like that. So I'll go back into rough. Actually, let's go to soft, and I'll click to open that. And I'll use that for an antenna material and also for my volume knob. Again, it doesn't look a whole lot different once we start changing lights, and we'll tweak these materials somewhat as well. I'll go back in here under the hard, shiny plastic. And let's see, maybe we'll pick kind of an orangey color for our Bez 1. And if I throw a material on here and I don't like how that looks, I can double click on the material in the scene, and now it's opened that for me. And if I click this little swatch, I can adjust that material. So if I want that a little more yellowish, then I can adjust that right there. And I can adjust by using RGB, or I can change this to all of these different color modes. I sometimes like the hue saturation value mode, because then I can adjust my saturation and the brightness of my material, and I know exactly what I'm going to get. And I can also just drag this and adjust the hue quite easily. So we'll just continue to add some materials. I do want to make this bezel a metallic. So I'll go under my metals, and I'll just scroll down here, and I'm going to go to chrome. You can really choose anything you want, obviously. Let's go back to my scene tree, and I think that's my bezel 1. So now we've got a chrome material on that. Now again, don't worry that these don't look quite right. As soon as we adjust our lighting, you'll really see these things change and really kind of pop. And let's just kind of go through and add a couple more materials just to kind of finish this off. So I'm going to go under shiny, and I'm going to throw a shiny black on this one, then also on what's going to end up being our LCD screen. And then I'd like to copy this material here. So there's a couple ways I can do that, and probably the easiest way is just to click on the face bezel where we've applied that material, and just choose copy material. And then I'm going to apply that to these 4 buttons. So I right click here, choose material, paste material. And then I think I'll put an aluminum button for this centerpiece. So I'll go up to my metals, I'll choose aluminum, go to basics, and let's throw a rough one on there for now, and we can adjust that later. So we have all of our basic materials applied. In the next lesson, we'll look at customizing these materials.